1066, the most famous date in English history, because it was the Battle of Hastings and the Norman conquest of England by William the Bastard, otherwise known as William the Cunt, otherwise known as William Duke of Normandy. So what the fuck was it all about? Well, as you know, England from the 6th century had been colonized or occupied by the Anglo-Saxons. The Anglo-Saxons were a mixture of various Germanic tribes from Germany and Denmark. The three groups were Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, and they had basically taken over the entire country of England, because England actually comes from Anglia, which is the land of the Angles. So England really is basically defined as the place that the Anglo-Saxons settled in. The Celts had fucked off to Scotland and Wales and Ireland, and England was a sort of German-speaking country full of German-speaking cunts. So, and then we have the Vikings as we did last time, and everything, and now also parts of England were also sort of Danish and sort of Norse culturally and so on, but it was all Christian as well. So England had a king called Edward the Confessor, and Edward the Confessor was an Anglo-Saxon, and he was related to the Vikings, because the Vikings at this point were kind of intermingled with the Saxons in England. And Edward the Confessor had become king after the death of King Canute, King Cunt. And unlike Cunt, Edward was actually Anglo-Saxon and from England, not a Norseman. Now, Edward the Confessor was not all-powerful. He had to rely on other people to keep him in power and to support him, because there were quite a lot of cunts around that were quite violent, and being a king in those times was no guarantee of staying a king. So anyway, the most powerful man in England was this cunt called Godwin, and he was the Earl of Wessex. Wessex was the most powerful kingdom, most powerful part of Anglo-Saxon England. It was the part of England which had been a kingdom, the kingdom of Alfred the Great, and but now England was one united kingdom, but Wessex continued to be an important part of it. Anyway, Godwin was the fucking Earl of Wessex, and he was really important. And he made demands on Edward and said, look, you've got to do what I fucking say. I'm going to start pushing you around. You're going to marry my sister. And Edward the Confessor married his sister. And really, Edward the Confessor didn't like this Godwin guy very much, because he was pushing him around, telling him what to do and stuff. And Edward the Confessor had friends in Normandy. Normandy is in France, and Normandy is a very interesting part of France because the Normans, the people in Normandy, were actually descended from Vikings who had been given this land by the King of France in order to stop them from attacking France. And they had become sort of French, and they'd taken the French language and French culture and French customs, but they still had this sort of badass, sort of hard man sort of culture. And they were excellent horsemen, and they mastered the art of using cavalry in battle. And anyway, Edward the Confessor tried to get some of his friends from Normandy to come to England and get rid of Godwin, but Godwin had actually managed to stop them from doing that by using his power and basically fucking keeping himself in power with his money and his influence. And Edward the Confessor thought he was a bit of a cunt and didn't like him. And he didn't like him so much that he refused to shag his wife because his wife was Godwin's sister, and he said, right, if I have to fucking marry her, I'll marry her, but I'm not gonna fucking shag her, so fuck you, Godwin. Now we don't know if he did or if he didn't, but he might have named the Duke of Normandy as his successor, as his heir, but we don't know if he did. Now, what happened is that when the king died in 1066, Godwin was already dead, and Godwin's son, Harold, had been named by Edward the Confessor to be his heir and to take over. And he supposedly did that on his deathbed. He was dying, and he said, "I'll fucking choose you to take over when I'm dead." And Harold had said, "Yeah, all right, I'm the king now." But he wasn't the only one who thought he should be king, because there was this other cunt called Harold Hardrada, who was a hard cunt, who was king in Norway. And Harold Hardrada was with Harold's brother. Harold's brother was a man called Tostig, who had been kicked out of England for being a massive cunt and raping a load of nuns and killing everyone. And he'd been pissed off, and he'd gone to Norway, and he'd got friendly with this Hardrada cunt. And then he said to Hardrada, "You should be king of England, and I should be your right-hand man, so let's fucking go." So they came back, and they were going to invade England and make him the king. At the same time, William, Duke of Normandy, the bastard, had decided that he was supposed to be the king of England, and he was very adamant about it and said that he'd been promised, and that it was a fucking travesty of justice that Harold had taken over as King of England. And William claimed that Harold himself had promised him that he would support him, William, to be King of England after the Confessor died. So you've got three people claiming to be King of England and being very serious about it. Harold, poor bastard, goes down to the south coast of England because he knows that William is coming. William doesn't come as quickly as expected. He's waiting for the weather to get better. He's making sure that he's got all his preparations in order. everything fucking packed and ready, and all the soldiers properly trained and supplied, and everything ready for the crossing. And Harold is sort of waiting for him down on the south coast of England, and he's ready for a fight. And then, while he's down there on the south coast of England, Hardrada and fucking Tostig, the traitor brother, land in the very north of England, Yorkshire, which is fucking hundreds of miles away, right in the other end of the fucking kingdom, in the north, with their army, and start fucking shit up and killing people and taking places over in England with all these fucking hard Viking cunts. So, and poor old Harold is right down in the south of England, miles and miles and miles away. So he has to take his army and he has to fucking march all the way from one end of the country to the other, right up to the north. And when he gets there, he has to fight this fucking battle against Hardrada and his brother. And they win the battle, Harold and his guys, and they kill Hardrada and they kill Tostig, the traitor brother. And they've just finished that, and they're like, fucking hell, that was exhausting. Fucking knackered now. And they get news, William's just crossed over the sea, and he's fucking over everything in the south of England. William is going around fucking setting fire to everybody and killing everyone in the south of England. And Harold's like, oh, for fuck's sake, I was just down there, and the minute I turn my fucking back, the cunt comes over. For fuck's sake. Can't I get a fucking break? So he has to march his army that's just fought a battle all the way back down again to the south of England to face William and the Normans. And by the time they get there, they're fucking knackered, you know, absolutely exhausted. And they fight the battle at Hastings, which is on the south coast of England. And well, the battle is not it's not a battle that's decided from the beginning. It's a close fought battle. Now the types of soldiers they have are a little different. The Anglo-Saxons fight on foot. They don't really like to use cavalry, and they fight in a similar way to the Vikings, like shield wall, big axes and stuff like that. Whereas the Normans use cavalry a lot, and they use archers a lot. But the Saxons have a defensive position on top of a hill, which gives them an advantage. Also, they have an advantage that it's possible for them to get reinforcements from elsewhere in England. So if they can hold that hill, then they might get reinforcements, whereas the Normans can't get reinforcements because all the rest of their people are in France. So what happens is the Normans start fucking them about with the cavalry and attacking them, and then some of the fucking Saxons run down the hill, and then they get surrounded by the Normans and get fucked up. And during the battle, Harold gets killed, and then it's all over then. William then marches to London and says that he's the king now, and all his dukes and his nobles and his knights, he's promised them that they're going to be the new bosses of England now, and he makes them all dukes and earls of various places in England. And all the poor fucking Anglo-Saxon guys are basically now going to be second-class citizens in England, treated like shit. And the French-speaking Normans are going to be the monarchy and the aristocracy forever now, and take over all of England. Now, he's already killed Harold, so that's the most important thing, and he's taken over the country. In the north of England, in Yorkshire and Derbyshire and Northumberland, they have a slightly different culture. They because they have a more of a Viking sort of heritage and culture, and they resist William, and they tell him to go fuck himself, and they refuse to give him the money and the taxes and stuff. So William just goes up there and fucking kills them all and sets fire to all their land and makes it so that they can't grow anything on the ground by putting salt on the ground, and fucks them over really badly. And that's called the harrying of the North. So he gave them a good fucking pasting. Um, uh, and then that was the Norman conquest, and the system of government that William arranged was the feudal system with him at the top as a hereditary monarch. Now the Anglo-Saxons had actually had an elected monarchy, so they chose their kings themselves. They had like a group of lords that voted for who's going to be the king, and sometimes they chose the son of the last king, and sometimes they didn't. Whereas the Normans set up a system where it was primogeniture, which meant that the eldest son, or if they didn't have a son, then the brother would become king next, and so on and so forth. And the same with all of the dukes and earls, that they would have hereditary titles. And so the people, the poor, scummy peasant people in England were Anglo-Saxon people and spoke in this sort of German language. And all the bosses and the lords and the royals, they were all these French-speaking imported Normans. Some people refer to this as the Norman yoke. Yoke means like oppression. And eventually the cultures sort of did mix a little bit, and the English language that eventually developed has some French aspects and French words and German as well. If you look at the Anglo-Saxon that was spoken by the Anglo-Saxons during the times of King Alfred and others, then it's really nothing like modern English whatsoever. It's very, very German and has a sort of a Latin grammar. Yeah. Now, William the Conqueror was a hard fucker, and he didn't take any shit from anybody, and you wouldn't fuck with him or his friends. And once he was established, there was no getting rid of him. He was there forever. When he died, he left 3 sons, and he had decided to divide his lands and kingdoms between the 3 of them. He had made his eldest son, Robert, the Duke of Normandy, and then he had made his second son to be King of England. For some reason, he thought that Duke of Normandy was better than being King of England. Anyway, and the third son got fuck all. His name was Henry, and he had a daughter as well called Adela. So William the Bastard died, and his eldest son William became King William II, and they called him William Rufus because he had a red face. And now a lot of religious people, monks and so on, priests from the time wrote about William Rufus that they thought he was a right cunt and that they hated him and all this. And the reason that most historians think this is because they think he was probably homosexual. And in those times, there was nothing that the church hated more than homosexuality. They thought it was evil, and that if you were gay, then you were going to hell and stuff, and you were a really bad person. and he didn't have any children, and he didn't get, or he didn't last very long. William was out hunting with his younger brother Henry, and somehow he accidentally got shot with an arrow and killed. So accident or not. Um, and his younger brother Henry then became king, Henry I, and he was a real hard bastard, and he wasn't satisfied with just being king of England. He actually went to Normandy and stole Normandy from his brother and became king of Normandy as well as England. Um, and he was quite a hard cunt. But we'll finish him next one and move on to the anarchy. The anarchy is the next video.